Oops, too much. I'm still adjusting my camera. All right, here we go. Welcome to another edition of AV Rant. I'm Tom Andrew, Associate Editor of Audioholics, and I'm here with
Rob H. We are beginning ahead of schedule slightly, but that's okay. People can roll back and catch it if they're watching us live.
Sorry,
We're
guys.
live.
I was ready 9 minutes early. We're starting 9 minutes early. I got no. I was saying I'm ready to go. I'm ready to go. It's been a
Yep.
really long couple of days, and like you ever have one of those days where every time you turn around something breaks? It's been like
Hmm.
that for like the last 3 days. Like today, I was like, no, my ice maker doesn't work on my refrigerator. And right before the podcast started, my brother was setting up the Blu-ray player to do what he does in there while I'm podcasting, and something went haywire, and I'm just like, ugh. My parents were like, "You're always so mad all the time." I'm like, "I'm not mad. I'm tired. I did not want to get out of that chair to come over here and poke at this thing." And it's not, I'm not mad. I'm just like, it's just want to dive headfirst into a beer, and it's Tuesday, and I can't do that. I mean, I could, but that would make me a bad human being, I think. But yeah.
Alrighty then, folks.
Enough of the complaint. I'm sorry. I
Preamble.
didn't mean that. I didn't mean for the pity train to leave so early from the station, but yes, apparently it did. Sorry about that. Let's roll this back. We'll start over again. Let's Well, how are things with you, Rob? Anything interesting and uplifting in your life?
No, I am in the
Hey,
same
the
boat of
pity
having no
train picks up another.
time. So I'm not gonna
I
go
know the
into
pity train picks up another passenger. Here we go. All right. Well, then we'll go straight into the listeners of the week. This
Yes,
week we
that's
have
happy news.
That
That
is
I mean,
Niclas.
legitimately, that's gosh, that sounded sarcastic when it
It
came out of my
was.
mouth. That's not what I meant. It actually is happy news.
It is. Niclas, Wilson, and Jack are our three listeners of the week. Jack came in just under the wire. Thank you very much, Jack,
Hmm.
and Wilson, and Niclas
Thank you,
for
thank you.
or Niclas. No, it's a funny spelling of
Nicholas.
his name. I'm gonna say Niclas.
Okay.
It gets sexy out that way. Anyway, you have to start calling him sexy Niclas. Anyways, no, that doesn't really go. Anyhow, yeah. So we're going to be doing some thanks for you guys for supporting the podcast. It keeps us going and allows us to not have a website, which would make podcasting hard. So that's good. If you want to contact us, you can contact us at Tom at AV Rant, Rob at AV Rant, at the website www.avrant.com, facebook.com/avrantpodcast, and Rob's at First Reflect, and that's on Twitter, and I'm at avrant_Tom. I think that's all of
Yes,
them.
and if you'd like the announcements of when we're going to start recording, you should follow me on Twitter because I don't think I've ever seen you actually tweet that out, Tom. I'm
I
like
don't.
the one who does it,
You do that thing.
and I have like I don't know what a quarter of the people following me who
I,
follow you because of the
I've only
podcast.
got like 500 followers. You know what? I once did that thing where you can put in your Twitter address and they'll tell you how many of your followers
Hmm.
are real. I had like
Oh,
something like over 90%, and I know like those Kardashians and the rest of them. It's all. I mean, not all, but there are a lot of bots that are following them. So they have 1.2 billion followers, but like only
yes. Yeah,
200,000 of them
I'm
are
sure
real.
when you have literally thousands more people following you every minute, that you're scrutinizing every one of them to make sure they're real.
Oh, I'm
Sure,
sure.
they've got the time to do that.
I'm sure they do. They're very.
I, on the other hand, actually could. I could track down each one of those people. They really are. That's how many followers I have.
Yeah, it's no piss him off. He'll do that. What's it? Jay and Silent Bob's that strike back or whatever when they get mad at somebody saying stuff about them on the internet and go around beating people
Find
up.
at his house.
That's like I think that's every person online's dream. At some point or another, you think, I just wish I could find out where they are. Just punch them in the face. But we will not do that because all of our followers are awesome and all of our
Yes.
listeners are also awesome. So, speaking of awesome listeners, we are going to be talking a lot about all of your questions, and we have a nice, I think, a pretty good spread of questions this week. We've got some EQ stuff, some subwoofer stuff, some speaker stuff, some
wireless stuff,
wireless
commercial
stuff.
audio stuff. I mean, we're going all over the place now. We're expanding our horizons.
That's right. If you've got an AV question, please let us know. We'll be happy to answer on the podcast. And people think, oh, well, they'll never get to Mike. We get to all the questions. That is a thing that we do. So far, we are not so big that we can pick and choose. I mean, we could, and I think we probably should, but we don't, and that's why our podcasts are 2 hours long. So
yes,
that and the fact that I vamp for the first 10 minutes of it. So, shall we just jump right in, Rob?
Let's shall.
Yes.
I see no reason to avoid doing so.
That's right. Andy, this is stuff over on Facebook stuff, so if you do follow us on Facebook, it's a very good way to get in contact with us. I do read most of it, though my phone's been quirky about telling me when you posted it, but I have read quite a bit of this and answered, and I usually do all the liking. Who sent us the link he sent us a link to the Harman study I think we talked about last week or the week before, different room correction EQ target curves and that sort of thing. He posted that he tried applying his favored, spelled in the British way.
The correct way.
The British way.
All U's after O's and whatnot.
Whatever. You can't just willy-nilly start doing that on my email. Targeted curves from the... Okay, let's start again. Anyways, there's a Harman study, and there's a target curve that was supposed to be the optimal curve for your home theater, and he tried it. So he's the one that sends us the link, and he went back and tried it on his home theater and thought it made his system sound colored and lost a lot of detail in the treble. I don't think that's... You know what, dude? I think it's absolutely dead on. I'm not surprised at that, because if you think about the quality of the speakers of listeners on this podcast versus the quality of speakers of people in general, you would like to roll off the high end of most of those speakers, because it's probably distorting and shrieking and making all sorts of funny, weird, high-pitched sounds that are not actually what they meant to. So rolling it off would do that.
The target curve that seemed to come out ahead in that particular study had a general sort of shape where there was a rise in the bass, as in the bass was louder than dead neutral, and a general roll off in the treble, so the highs are being quieter than dead neutral. That seemed to be the general shape of the curve that people like. So his description saying, yeah, I kind of made it sound a little bit more colored and less detailed, that fits right in line with what that. And Andy was describing that he said near field, but then he said about 6 feet, which is a little bit farther than what we normally consider near field. Near field,
if you can't reach out and touch your speaker, you're probably not near field.
Yeah, but it's that would be like midfield, I guess. If there's I don't think that's really well defined. But I mean, 6 feet is closer than normal.
Yes,
shall we say?
I would say that it is not.
Yeah, so I mean, the room that they were using in the Harman study. I mean, this is a great example. That was the curve that was favored in that study with those speakers, which were B&W towers, Bowers and Wilkins towers, in that room, which was a well-treated and fairly large room. So, even that, right? I mean, I totally think that the study was legitimate, but you still have to say, well, there's still a whole lot of variables aside from just the target curve that people happen to favor, because you got the room, you got the speakers, you got where everyone was sitting, you got however loud they were playing it, and we still don't know that. So, yeah, I mean, I think it just goes to show maybe it's not one size fits all.
Oh, for sure it's not, and especially when you're dealing with a completely different sitting arrangement as far as your speakers. And then as you switch, I mean, I just gotta believe that the tweeter has the B&W speakers are very good speakers. That's without question. But I am not surprised that the target curve is a little bit more rolled off on the top end, because that's where you end up with most of your problems, and that's where we really recognize most of our problems. The low end, on the other hand, is someplace we don't hear as well. Therefore, and I will almost say, especially in a well-treated room, your bass tends to sound a little bit less, weaker in some ways, because there's not as much room reinforcement going on. So in the well-treated room, you're going to get evener bass. Well, you take those same speakers, or I don't know what the setup exactly was, and you put them into a room that's really, not well-treated, you might get this 70 hertz or 60 hertz or 30 hertz hump that just makes it sound a lot louder overall. So, you're going to have to tame that down. So I'm not surprised. Nelson. Apparently we called him Bill on the last podcast. Yeah. We did not try to kill him, so yay. But anyways, you know what? Star Trek Into Darkness is on Netflix. completely random. I thought of Bill, and then Kill Bill, which is also just come on Netflix.
Yeah.
Star Trek in the Darkness is on Netflix, and I don't think I thought that's.
I don't quite get the significance, but okay, there's your train of thought.
That was
whatever
my train of thought.
was.
Anyways, I want to see it. I want to watch it because I watched it once and I didn't. I don't remember.
Okay.
Anyways, Nelson, we called him Bill in the last podcast because he called in, used the line, yay, but we couldn't really hear him very well, so we kind of guessed it was Bill, but it was Nelson, which obviously sounds nothing like Bill. So sorry.
I am guilty of, what happened was Google Voice does the thing where it tries to write out.
It translates.
It tries to do a transcription. Voice to text transcription. It tries to do that, and it put his name as Bill, so that was already in my head because I had seen the email saying, you got a Google Voice message from Bill, so that was already in my head, so that's what I heard. There you go, Maybe it didn't sound that way, but I just thought it did because I saw the word.
It's funny when you see those things where they have the martial arts scenes and somebody's punching somebody, it looks real until you turn the sound off, and then it doesn't look real. It's the same thing. It's also the same thing when you go into the high-end stores, and they're like, you're going to hear how lush the mid-range is. They're just trying to. So, anyways, they poison you. It's bias. Google bias.
I was primed.
You were. Fred C. He posted his. Okay, we posted.
Oh, we didn't talk about what Nelson did on Facebook. He put up some photos in a comment.
Oh, I'm sorry.
To, his post.
I skipped past that. Right, he was the one with the
past what he actually did.
Yeah, he was with the Vandersteen speakers. So he posted some pictures of his Vandersteen speakers. If you've never seen them, or you want to see Nelson's Bill's speakers, then you can in quote. Then you can.
It's just his name now.
I think we should just call him Bill. We just go with. I think we already have a Nelson. We might have two Nelsons, or we might have the same one, but we don't have any Bills that I'm aware of. So
well, we got a Bill coming up later on. So.
Oh, do we? Oh, we do. There he is. Are we sure that's not Nelson?
That is definitely not Nelson. That is the Bill coming up is definitely a Bill. Yeah.
Okay. Well, okay, Nelson, you can be Nelson. All right. So if you want to see Nelson's Vandersteen speakers, go over to our Facebook page and check them out. Fred C. We posted his photos of his very heavily braced DIY subwoofer. That was the one that it was sort of trapezoidal or oddly shaped. He forwarded us the plans from GR Research that he used, and I guess we're going to link those up somehow.
Yep.
Yeah. It's a PDF.
I'll put a link to those plans, yep.
And to answer some of the questions we asked on the podcast, number one, he modified the box to be 5-sided so that it would be aesthetically, it would match his speakers aesthetically. Makes sense.
And his speakers, he also made the cabinets himself. So all of them have a little point in the front, sort of 5-sided wise. So that's where that whole thing came from.
Whatever. Number two, he just used a router and a circle guide to cut out the holes for the driver, so it wasn't any sort of big monster thing, which would have been...
Hole saw? A 12-inch hole saw? That would have been something.
The size of a garbage can lid. It would have been awesome. Come on. And the MDF is all 1/2-inch thick inside, and everything else is 3/4 inch thick, with the front baffle being 2 1/8 thick sandwich. Dang!
Yeah, several layers of stuff on that front baffle that actually holds the active driver there.
The active driver. That's a big front baffle. Yes, he's got some sort of... That's one of those things where at some point during the build you put it where it's going to be, and then you finish the build because you don't want to have to move it afterwards. All right. Yeah, it's like you don't install the driver until it's already in the home theater. He's also made a Facebook photo album for his speakers, which are also DIY cabinets, and I guess we're going to link that up as well. Yep. So if you want to see more DIY stuff, if you guys are into this sort of thing, honestly, just send us your pictures or put an album on Facebook, and we'll link to it because that's really cool. It's really cool to do stuff like that, and it gives you a sort of pride of ownership that you really can't get any other way.
Yeah, and his speaker cabinets look really nice. They're really, really nicely done. So, but I mean, it gives you an appreciation too of, sometimes we sort of wonder why speakers cost what they cost. And you'll often hear, like, the Gary Yakubian mentioned that when we did the SVS interview, how the cabinet itself is like a huge portion of the cost.
Yeah.
And so when you actually see what someone who's doing it themselves and building it themselves and probably overbuilding it compared to what you'd get from a manufacturer who's building it for you, but you sort of get a sense of, well, yeah, that does take a lot of time and a lot of effort. It makes sense that these things cost money.
And MDF isn't cheap either. I mean, that's just raw materials. You're going to spend more than you think you're going to spend on it. So there is definitely, I mean, obviously a company like SBS is going to be buying bulk and getting some sort of discount.
Sure.
But, it's still a lot. So, and I would, I would think that what you end up paying in the end is you might get a nicer looking speaker and certainly something that's tailored exactly to your needs as far as aesthetics, which you cannot really buy anywhere else. But you could certainly get a cheaper speaker with similar, not certainly, but I think in many cases you could get a cheaper speaker with similar performance just by buying mass market. But then again, you just have a speaker like everybody else. So I am sure that that Fred and other people like him who are into this sort of thing would be happy to discuss on Facebook stuff. So post questions there, and I'm sure he'd be happy to answer them because that's not me. Keep me away from power tools as much as possible. Jack C over on Facebook. I'm guessing we have more than one Jack. Jack C over on Facebook took our advice from last week and set up his. That's right. So last week we were talking about Jack's. He's got two Outlaw subwoofers. Okay. He had the one, and then he wanted to buy the second one, and we said, yes, you can buy the second one. It will match, and we told him how to make it match. Right. Then last week he was saying it was too loud. Okay. So that we discussed using the SPL meter to level match and how to level match your subs. So Jack has done that. But when he ran Odyssey afterwards, the setup microphone, through the setup microphone and everything else, it said on the screen, the initial subwoofer test tone where it asks you to adjust the knob on your subwoofer until it reads about 75 on the screen, the reading was 96 dB. So he was like, well, it says 75 on the SPL meter, and there must be something wrong going on there. So he just left it, and Odyssey tried to knock it down as much as it could, which is negative 15 dB, which is not enough. But didn't it still seemed awfully loud. He's very confused. What went wrong? Rob pointed out a really good point, which I'll let him say, but about the fact that he just let us know about the question that Odyssey asked him. But we did not say last week about your settings on your SPL meter. That's mostly because different SPL meters might have different settings, but it just flat out, it just fell out of my head. I didn't even think about it. Basically, you want to set your SPL meter to C weighting. Okay, and usually slow. That's if it's a slow fast setting. I usually you want to set it to slow. Okay, and what this does is it's weighting the measurement as it's coming in, so that you are getting an accurate, as far as what we're talking about, reading on your mic. What happened when you have it, if you have it on A weighting or you have it on fast, is that it's not going to be as accurate for you. Okay, and that's what seemed to be happening here. I think it rolls off on A weighting. I've never actually used it because, the guides that I read when I was first starting off with this stuff always said C and slow or whatever it was, and that's what I said on. I've never felt the need to change it for any reason, so I've always just used the C.
You probably wouldn't want to, yeah.
Yeah, so obviously I wouldn't want to because I'm pretty sure that's what Jack did. But what he said about Odyssey clued Rob in to a kind of workaround that's going to help him out.
Yeah, well, first of all, just to adjust the SPL meter, the sound pressure level meter, and its weighting. The weighting is just a filter. That's all it is. The different weightings are just different filters. And C weighting is basically, it means it's pretty linear between about 80 hertz and about 8,000 hertz. And then there's filters. So there's a filter sort of above 8,000 and a filter below 80, and it sort of makes those read quieter than they actually are. But between 80 and 8,000, it's pretty accurate. A weighting moves that filter to a much smaller range, so it's really only accurate between about 500 and 5,000. So when you're trying to set your subwoofer up, if you have your SPL meter set in A weighting, it is going to give you a very poor reading because it's starting to make things appear quieter than they really are below 500 hertz. I mean, that's way above the bass range. So if you're playing that bass setup test tone, which is expecting, at least 200 hertz at the highest, right? You're going to have to turn it way up so that that filter that's being applied at 500 hertz actually gives you the reading of 75 dB when you're only playing a bass test tone. So yeah, make sure it's on C weighting. That, I think, is the source of Jack's primary problem. But when you have the newer version of Odyssey, when you first plug in the microphone, one of the very first things it does is it starts playing a test tone through the subwoofer output, and it shows you a display on the screen, and it says adjust the knob on your subwoofer until on screen it says something about 75 dB, 74, 76, plus or minus a few dB is fine, but try to target 75 on screen. So what you can do if you're setting up two subwoofers, and you don't have the sub-EQ HT system that actually does two subwoofers separately, all you can do is have only one of them powered on, only one of your subwoofers powered on, and get the on-screen reading to read about 72 dB, get it to read about 72 for that one, turn that one off, turn the other subwoofer on, and get that one to read about 72, and then turn them both on, and it should now read on screen something close to 75. I mean, if you're off by a couple of dB, no big whoop. That's the way to do it. So you don't really need the SPL meter if you have that version of Odyssey and it does that for you. And go with the Odyssey readings. Don't override it with what your SPL meter said, because ultimately if you're using the Odyssey setup, well, that's the microphone that really counts. And yeah, that would be the easy workaround in this case. Don't worry too much about what your SPL meter was saying. I think it was A-weighted.
Yeah, I think it was too. Okay, so that's Jack. Bill. Bill, not Nelson. Just wanted to comment that he uses his Zone 2 and 3 outputs from his Integra receiver and connects them to a Sonos transmitter with Sonos speakers in his wood shop and outside. He was just concerned that we were cautioning listeners against using the zone capabilities of receivers, but that it can be very effective and convenient, such as in his case. That is true, Bill. There's a lot of reasons why Zone 2s and 3s can work. The fact of the matter is, though, is that most people have problems on the input side, not on the output side. They're wondering why their Blu-ray player won't go to their Zone 3. Or they're wondering, well, it's just two-channel, though. I just put a CD in there. It doesn't matter. They're wondering why this doesn't work, why that doesn't work. And the honest truth is, from my personal perspective, is that troubleshooting zone issues on a podcast is like trying to teach pigs to fly. It confuses the pigs and just makes you really frustrated. So I try not to do that. It's the same thing when people are like, oh, my screen's too blue. What should I do? I don't know. Don't mess with the settings next time or whatever. I don't know. Get a different TV. It's really hard to kind of troubleshoot these sorts of things. So that being said, there's absolutely tons of reasons why you can use a Zone 2 or a Zone 3 and tons of ways to do it. It's just the input side is the side that usually gives people the problems.
Yeah, I like his idea of using those Zone 2 and those Zone 3 pre-outs, because they're just the red and white analog stereo outs. That's what the zones in Zone 2 and Zone 3 outs are. And I like that idea of using that, or you could even maybe use the, if it's a Zone 2 optical output, or even if it's a Zone 2 HDMI output, but connecting that to a wireless system like Sonos. That's a good idea. That's a smart idea, because then it allows you to have all of your sources connected to that one receiver, and you can switch between your sources on that receiver as long as they're stereo sources, if you're going to be using Zone 2 and Zone 3, but then using the output connections to power a wireless system. I mean, that is a cool setup that we hadn't mentioned that Bill's using there. So I like that use case, instead of trying to think of how am I going to run speaker wires from the the built-in amplifiers that I'm assigning, or how am I going to run a connection all the way over there and have another amplifier in that other room and get that other amplifier to turn on when I want it to turn on, and that kind of stuff. So the idea of connecting it to wireless is cool. I like that.
It is a good idea. He's obviously got it set up right. The problems I've often had with receivers in Zone 2 and 3 is that unfortunately, people don't really think far enough ahead for how this is actually going to work. And yeah, you get the speaker wire problem. Just say that they got this whole speaker wire thing figured out and everything else, or maybe they're using this sort of system. When in his case, the Sonos controls most of it. You control it from its own control. But if you're not using like the app control to control zone 2 and 3, you literally have to walk back into your home theater and then take the IR remote and point it at the receiver to make it change inputs for your zone 2 and 3. And people are like, that's stupid. How come I have to do that? Well, because they just don't do RF remotes. They really kind of don't. I've seen a couple receivers that their zone 2 remote will be RF. Very, very rare. I haven't seen one in a while. So you end up having to get some sort of harmony or something else, and that just adds another level of complexity to people who are really looking to simplify their lives. And that's why a lot of times when I'm talking about stuff like this, I'm like, you know what? If mostly what you're doing is Pandora or Spotify or something like that, just get yourself a wireless speaker system. There's tons of them out there. Sonos is one, but there's lots of other ones that are cheaper that you can control from your phone, you can control from the dedicated remote, or just control from the face of the speaker system. And then, yeah, it's not going to sound as good, and yes, you won't have access to your actual physical discs. But then again, if a lot of them are going to have the ability to stream from the internet, they'll stream from your local hard drives, whatever it's connected to the internet, to your wireless network, and is accessible, and that's pretty much all you really need anyways for most people. So, to me it's an ease of use, and really it becomes a cost-effective thing. Now, I do want to say, because he mentioned Sonos, that Denon announced this week that they are announcing something called HEOS, which is, I'm sure it stands for something, but they didn't say anything in their press release. It's very sketchy right now. It's all the information coming out is very thin. There's 3 speaker systems. It's obviously meant to take Sonos on. Obviously, okay? It's an all-in-one system. They call it the 3, 5, and 7, which I think is very similar to the Sonos naming.
Very close, yeah.
It's meant to stream content from the cloud, which I guess is Spotify and Pandora and those sorts of things. It's also can stream from your NAS drives, so your network accessible drives, and they have USB ports, so you can stream locally as well. And if you plug a USB port into one, it can stream to any one of the other ones. Plus, it can stream stuff directly from your phone, and it can be controlled from the Denon controller app. My thought when I was writing this thing up, that thing that excited me was like Denon might finally get away from zone 2s and zone 3s and zone 4s and zone 5s and just say, we work with our own wireless speaker systems, and here they are. And yes, we have a zone 2, but for zone 3, it's this. And because these things can be set up as multiple zones, you can stream something to one, something else to something else, to the other one, and that sort of thing. They all work sort of separately, which is kind of really cool. So we'll see exactly how that kind of shakes out, but I like this idea. They're a little more expensive than Sonos, which I think was a bad decision on their part, but they are a little bit more
expensive than Sonos. Okay,
yeah. They're not as competitive as I'd hope they'd be, but it's interesting. I'm gonna keep my eyes on that one. It might end up being a recommendation for me, but I'm really gonna have to see how it shakes out.
Just to clarify, what was the name again, just so people have it?
HEOS, HEOS, Denon HEOS. Audioholics should have an article up by the time this podcast goes live.
Cool.
So we'll see. I wrote it like 2 days ago and completely forgot about it and didn't post it. So it's posted. I mean, I put it in the back end for editorial review. Anyways, okay. So Kris with the K wrote us last week that his Denon 3312 receiver was no longer outputting any audio or video after he had done a firmware update. Bricked it. That's what we like to say. We bricked it. Rob suggested trying to do a manual firmware update via USB. But when then that didn't work, Kris contacted Denon. Always a good idea. They instructed him on how to do a complete reset of the unit that is not described anywhere in the manual. Of course, it's not. They wouldn't want you to be able to do that, because then people would do it. Honestly, and then I lost all my settings. You have to give them back to me. He did lose all his settings, but his receiver is now working again. That's it's very nice. It usually involves some sort of combination of remote presses and pressing one or more buttons on the front face of it.
Actual buttons on the unit itself usually have to be pressed and held in some order.
Yeah. And I've done that before too on stuff that I've had to that I've tested to death, and it does work. You do have to reset everything though. You have to put all your settings back
So
in.
I mean, the thing to take away here though is that, you know, sometimes you'll read the Amazon review, right? And someone says, I just did a firmware update on my receiver and now it doesn't work, and so therefore this brand is garbage. You know,
Exactly.
1 star, right? You'll see that, or you'll see it on forums. People come in, you know, this thing just completely stopped working on me. All I did was a firmware update. You know, this brand is horrible.
Honestly, Rob, I think you're
them a
giving
call.
people especially on the forums, too much credit. They're not saying that they're not coming in. They're saying they're not saying anything about the firmware. I just bought a Denon and now it doesn't work. It completely shut down. It won't turn it back on. I tried everything. I tried this. It's complete garbage. And it takes like 5 or 6 questions to get them to admit that they actually did something to it. Oh well, I do to update the firmware. Oh, you did? Gee, you think that might be it?
So I mean, this was not Kris. Kris was totally willing to work through the problem and find a solution. You know, but I just wanted to say, like, for some reason we're often very, you know, reticent to call customer service. That's, you know, well within people's rights, because a lot of the customer service things are horrible when you try to call them.
Yeah, for sure.
But you know, I don't know how Kris's experience went calling Denon's customer service, but hey, he got an answer and it worked. I mean, yes, it's an inconvenience. It did reset all his settings for all his speakers and stuff like that, but at least it got it working again. And I mean, you know, unfortunately, these things do happen sometimes. Doing a firmware update, some glitch in the process, and it's like, wow, did I just break my entire, you know, receiver? That's a scary position to find yourself in when that happens. But you know, it's worth it. Give them a call. Yeah. It's worth it.
And to be clear here, I wasn't saying that people who brick their or who do an update and something goes wrong, that they've done something wrong. I'm saying that people who go on the forums and complain that their receiver's crap and don't admit that they had actually done something to maybe possibly have caused it are disingenuous and deserve not to get help. Kris is not one of those people. So good for you, Kris. Good for you for figuring out. And honestly, they may have done. I know this sounds stupid, but I find that over the time, especially up kids, settings get changed, and I don't figure it out until I go, what? I have large rear speakers? Do I? Did not know that. Interesting. So, yeah, Kris, sometimes just going through and resetting everything and starting over again can get you a little bit better sound. And his second comment was he got his wife involved in their buying of a subwoofer, and they agreed to buy a SVS SB13 Ultra. Yeah, man. So this is a sealed box.
Your wife's pretty cool. That's the takeaway there. That's what we know.
Everybody's asking Kris what his wife's sister's name is. Ultra subwoofer. He likes it so much that they're planning on selling his Velodyne subwoofer so that he can get a second SVS. And he says that SVS should be sponsoring this podcast after all the sales we made for them. Honestly, guys, if you're buying something because of this podcast, the best thing that you can do is email the company and tell them, or call the company and tell them. I would rather you email like the president, but email them and say, listen, I'm buying this because I got my question answered on AV Rant, but I would love to get sponsored. It will absolutely in no way change my. The only single way that my recommendations can be changed by a manufacturer is if they send me a piece of gear, I test it and like it, I will then recommend it. My recommendations are limited to my experience, and I have a lot of experience, as does Rob. But we certainly we don't have experience with every single speaker from every single manufacturer. So if I could get some more speaker manufacturers to send me stuff, they would get more recommendations. Or I would not recommend them. But they have, as it is right now, they're not getting recommended right now. So they at their best chances to do that. So if you guys want to spend an afternoon emailing everybody you ever bought something from that because of our recommendation, then I would not hate you for that. I wouldn't.
And you know, one thing we haven't mentioned at all, but other podcasts do a good job of mentioning, is that giving ratings or reviews on iTunes really helps the visibility of the podcast. I don't think we've ever made that part of our promotion, but it would actually help. Give a rating or a review. It doesn't I don't think it even matters what the rating is. It's just a matter of people giving ratings. It bumps you up in the visibility on iTunes, which is where more people get their podcasts on.
Right. The only thing that I would ask is that. Mention that we changed our format so that we're answering questions. I think it's been a good thing for us to do. It was Rob's suggestion, really. I think we have to put that on Rob. So I think it's been great, and it definitely makes my life a little bit easier. I don't have to go researching topics anymore. And I think it's connecting better with you guys. So if you mentioned that in your comments, that would be great. If not, whatever. We're the same place we were before. Shannon over on Facebook again with the Facebook.
I kind of put together the topic list in somewhat of a hurry this week.
These next four people are from Facebook.
They were, yeah.
All right. Usually Rob's a little better organized than this. Rob does a lot for this podcast. I do a lot. I do what I do as well. He's a couple of months away from returning to the U.S. from Germany. Okay, so he's living in Germany. But he's gonna be coming back in a couple of months, and he wants to break ground in this new home theater. He knows he's going to get a pair of SVS subwoofers, which he will tell the Gary Ucubian. Make sure you email him and say, I bought these because they be rent. But he's unsure which speakers to buy. He wants 7, which I would automatically say, do you really need 7? Wanting is one thing. Needing is something completely else. So I don't know how big his theater is, so we'll see. His budget is between $4,000 and $5,000. What can he do while he's still in Germany so they can hit the ground running once he returns to the States? And what are some of the brands he should be considering? Well, there's just I would consider all of the brands.
Yeah,
you're obviously not listening to anything right now, but I would consider them all. To be honest with you, I'm sure Rob has very specific recommendations, but if it were me, I would be in talks with all of the ones that we have ever recommended as far as free shipping or partial free shipping back and forth. You should definitely have those on your list because it is really just the hassle of you having to take them back to put them back in the boxes and take them back to the store. Or to the post office, and I would be doing a lot of research on what you can listen to locally and have a really clear plan on what it is that you're going to test, because you cannot buy a speaker without listening to it. I mean, you can, and I did.
Can, yeah.
And I was happy with the speakers when I got them. I do wish I think that it's just better if you listen. As much as you can be happy. I mean, I could say, hey, Veris Grand speakers, fantastic speakers. You'll be thrilled with them, and I think you will be. I'm absolutely positive you would be. But at the same time, if you haven't heard them, you might not be, and then where will you be? So make sure you listen to as much as possible. If I were you, I would be doing research on what I want to listen to as soon as I get here. I would also have my SVS subwoofers already ready to go, so that they were, and I mean that. I would have them set up, ready to go, at least in the house or very close to being shipped to you, so that when you're listening to all this stuff, you would already have the subwoofers that you can pair with them and hear them all together with the subs and without the subs and everything else.
Yeah, because the bass response of different speakers can definitely sway your decision, but we tend to give it too much credence. Because Absolutely. If we find a speaker, let's say I just like a lot of bass, and I'm just comparing speakers without the use of a subwoofer, and one pair of speakers produces more bass than the other, and I go, whoa, those are the ones for me. But then you get your subwoofers into your system, and that levels the playing field as far as the bass reproduction goes, and all of a sudden you discover, oh, when I'm not paying so much attention to the differences in the bass, it turns out the speakers I didn't like as much are actually more detailed in the treble, and I like that too. And I just didn't notice it because I was paying so much attention to the bass in the previous comparison. So it is a really good idea to have the bass be a level playing field, because that is going to be so much up to your room. And if you're using subwoofers and you know you're going to, then have them in there, level that part of it. But what I wanted to say is, when you're looking in this price range, $4,000 to $5,000 to get 7 speakers, because that is not his subwoofer budget included. His subwoofer budget is separate from the $4,000 to $5,000. So he has a very nice budget for 7 speakers. It's a little bit of a double-edged sword because every brand has an offering in this price range. Every brand is going to have a pair of towers that go for about $2,000 for the pair, bookshelves that are, around $1,000 for the pair of bookshelves, a center speaker that's around $1,000 or less, and you put those together and bam, there you are. You're right in that price range that you're targeting. And I mean, I think you'd be hard-pressed to buy any of the well-known brands, any of the Internet Direct brands that we've ever recommended. I think you'd be hard-pressed to buy any of those, get them home, and be genuinely disappointed by their sound. When you're talking about, towers that cost $2,000 a pair, almost all of them sound pretty darn good, but this is going to be a matter of which ones do you like best, which ones work best for your room. And, Shannon hasn't given all the details of his room. I don't know what his room setup is going to be like. Could he make better use of speakers that are really wide dispersion or really narrow dispersion? I don't know. So,
it's thinking about room treatments as well.
Yeah.
I mean, this is a time to be planning because I don't know what breaking ground means. That could mean he's actually going to build one, or if he's just going to set one up. He should be in talks with Audioholics and the other companies that do room treatments to make sure that he can get that stuff going too. Because treating that room and getting that room as set up as you can have before you start testing these speakers, it's going to make a huge difference. You get some speakers that are, got a really laid-back top end, and you're very, very happy with them, and you're super bright, no furniture in it, nothing but carpet, if you're lucky, and some windows. You're going to go, these sound pretty good, and you treat that room with a bunch of furniture, and you're like, they sound muffled. Or you get something and you have all sorts of boxes and stuff like that in there, or maybe God knows what, maybe you're storing half your room in there as you're doing something else. You get some really bright speakers. Well, they're cutting through all that stuff, so they sound great. Once you get everything out and your room gets more settled, you're suddenly getting listener fatigue, getting headaches by the end of a movie.
Yeah, I mean, it's kind of funny when we talk about the differences in speakers, because I mean, speakers, out of all the things you can buy, they definitely make the biggest difference to the sound overall. But there are some things that you can alter, after you already have the speaker, and there are some things that you can't. So, if you have a speaker that just flat out does not play some part of the frequency band, I mean, that's unlikely in this price range, but if you ever bought a speaker that just, it rolls off at 8 kilohertz and everything above 8 kilohertz is just way quieter than it should be and eventually disappears, you can't get that back. You can't EQ that back. You can't position that back. You can't toe in that back. If those frequencies are just gone, they're gone. But if you have a speaker that's, it's a little bit louder in this particular frequency range, or it's a little bit quieter, you can EQ that. That is not, you're stuck with that forever and ever. That can be equalized. That can be altered in the signal. So the things that you can't change are the transient response. You can't change the inertia of the drivers. You can't change how quickly they come back to a stop when the signal says, hey, stop making noise, and you were already moving. You can't change how quickly they stop moving. That is something that is inherent to the speaker. You can't change the dispersion of the speaker with the signal. How wide and even the sound goes out to the left and right of dead center ahead of it. So what I would suggest, while you're in Germany, because Germany has plenty of hi-fi shops that you can go and listen to speakers, try to listen. Don't worry about price, because you're not buying the speakers while you're in Germany. Don't worry about that. And this goes for anyone who's just listening for speakers. Listen to anything you can, but try and find ones that have very obvious different designs. Try to listen to something that's an electrostat or a planar magnetic, or uses ribbon tweeters, or something that uses a big horn, or something that uses concentric drivers. Try to get a smattering of things and get some sort of sense of, do I like things that have really narrow dispersion or really wide dispersion? Do I like things that use big, heavy drivers that have lots of inertia and mass to them, or ones that use tiny little ribbons that stop on a dime? If you can get some sort of sense, you can maybe lean in a certain direction once you get back and you're ready to buy.
Once you get back, yeah. And don't be afraid when you're in these hi-fi shops. Man, I mean, if there's a hi-fi shop and they won't let you move the speaker around a little bit, or move the seat, or do whatever you want, you don't need to be listening there anyways. So, really, don't be afraid to say, hey, I brought my own material, or hey, I've you know, can I spread those speakers apart? Can I listen to them, when they're pointing straight out, so I can hear the off-axis response? Can I listen to them when they're facing me directly, so I can hear the direct response? Don't be afraid to ask those kind of questions. And a lot of these guys are just like me and Rob, where they're just enthusiasts that happen to be selling stuff. And some of them are going to be salesmen and pushy and everything else. And if you're just like, listen, I'm going to be buying. I can't promise I'm never going to buy anything here, but I can promise I never will if you don't let me listen to your speakers. And I'm not buying today, but I'm going to buy someday, and I need to start listening to get an idea of what I like. And I think they'll understand that. So I think just be honest about it. You can kind of be semi-honest because you're probably not buying speakers in Germany. But
if you want us to tell you right now, buy this brand and buy these models, when you're playing in that type of price range, there is no way we can do that right now. There are just way too many really good options. This is not a case of, oh, you're gonna run into something horrible and we're gonna warn you away that and only steer you towards this one brand. It's like, no, man, you got lots of choices in this.
You want an answer to a question like this, Shannon? You need to give us 3 models. Say, I like this, this, and this, and we'll come down on something. We'll actually probably come down on 2 of them, and you'll probably pick the 3rd one. That's what's going to happen. Shannon also wants to know why there isn't a TV show dedicated to reviewing home theater equipment and showcasing rooms. There's probably a lot of reasons why there isn't one, not the least of which is I don't think that many people would watch it. But it's sort of like having a TV show about high-end sound. Most people don't have high-end sound that's coming out of their TV, so they're like, I don't get it. You know what I mean? So,
it's advertising high def on a standard def TV, right?
Exactly. That's pretty much why. All right. Moving on to Steven. Steven B. First, I want to thank us for explaining Odyssey Dynamic EQ in his words so much better than what's in the manual. That's setting the bar pretty low, but thank you, Steven. He says it's made a big improvement having it set up properly and activated. Good. Steve would also like to know how to get his surround back speakers playing with all content. He has Denon and Denon X4000. And after doing this auto setup, it was definitely aware that he's using 7 speakers, but he's not hearing any sound coming from his surround back speakers. How can he fix this? Since I know Rob is dealing with stuff like this all the time. Rob, say it real quick so that we can move on.
Sure. This is a listening mode setting. The receiver, by default, let's say you plug in your cable box, and that's sending out a 5.1 Dolby digital signal whenever you're watching HDTV. Or you plug in your Blu-ray player, and that is sending out a 5.1 True HD or DTS HD master audio signal when that's what the soundtrack is on the disc. By default, the receiver is just going to play that back as it is in 5.1. It is not going to make use of your 6th and 7th surround speakers that are behind you, your surround back speakers. All you have to do is... this pretty much goes for any of them. Specifically for Denon, on their remote, they have 4 buttons that are labeled as listening modes. They're called movie, music, I don't know, something else impure, probably game or something like that.
Usually, yeah.
Definitely movie and music, and you'll see that on pretty much all the remotes for all the receivers. They'll have listening mode buttons. They'll at least have movie and music, and usually game. And so if you just keep pressing the movie mode, it'll cycle through all the available listening modes that are, for movies or for music. Not really a huge difference between those two. You probably just stick with the movie one. In Denon's case, if you press and hold any of those buttons, it'll actually bring up a menu on screen that shows you all the available ones, and then you can go up and down through it and select the one you want. What you want to do is activate Dolby Pro Logic 2X. Dolby Pro Logic 2X takes any sound format from 2 channels up to 5.1, and it adds in the 6th and 7th surround back channels. So you will see something like Dolby Digital plus DPL, standing for Dolby Pro Logic 2X. That will be one of the listening mode options, or Dolby True HD plus DPL 2X. So if you have that as your sound mode, that will get your 6th and 7th speakers working.
Yep. Yeah, and yes, it's goofy, and yes, it's stupid, and I totally agree, Steven. I'm sure you're complaining about that right now. It's like, why didn't it just do it? It knows I have those speakers. Because engineers, that's why. So.
And do not worry if you listen to a actual 7.1 soundtrack on, True HD or DTS HD Master Audio 7.1 soundtrack, it will just automatically pay that back in 7 channels. So you don't need Dolby Pro Logic 2X. That will automatically turn off. So.
Yeah, it will turn it off.
No worries there.
Cesar over on Facebook, he's a bit torn on his subwoofer decision. Oh. I bet he's considering an He is. He's considering an SVS SB2000, which is a new one, the sealed box. He also finds the Velodyne WiQ or WIQ.
YQ, yeah, YQ.
Like
Wi-Fi, but with a Q. YQ.
Oh, Velodyne, what have you done? What has gone on with you? You guys are crazy. Subwoofers are very enticing because of their wireless connection and built-in automated EQ. The YQ subwoofers are comparable performers. He'd like to have those features. So what are our thoughts? Rob, since you sent the link to this, go ahead.
Over at about.stereos.com, Brent Butterworth has reviewed both the SB2000 from SBS and the largest of the Velodyne YQ subwoofers, the 12-inch version. And he's done full measurements on them and everything like that. And, well, the YQ, even though it's a ported box, and the SB2000 is a sealed box, and normally ported boxes are able to play a little bit lower and a little bit louder, that's not the case here. The SB2000 can actually play lower and louder than the Velodyne YQ. Do you need that extra extension and output in a small room? It's going to depend. But ultimately, the SB2000 is still the superior performer overall, according to his review and according to his measurements.
What's the price difference between these? Do we know?
The YQ is more expensive. I think it's $899.
So it's not that much more expensive.
It's not that much more, but it is a little bit more.
Is it sealed? Is that $700? The SB?
Yeah, the SB2000 is $699. Yeah.
$699.
Yeah. So it's a couple $100 more to get the YQ, and the YQ is not playing as low or as loud. It's just giving you this wireless feature. So, in my opinion, because you can get a separate wireless system for less money than the difference in cost, why not get the superior performance, the lower and louder output, and then add on a wireless thing versus, buying it all in once and paying more and not getting quite the same performance. That's one thing. There are other subwoofers out there, really good ones, such as HSU's ULS15. That is also a wireless subwoofer. Has wireless built right into it, but that is a more expensive subwoofer. That's up in the $1,000 to $1,100 range, and it's a big 15-inch driver. But these wireless subwoofers do exist.
Before I give my opinion, I'm going to go on to the next part of his question. Since a big feature for him was wireless connection, do we have any thoughts on the available wireless subwoofer connection kits? In particular, Cesar has noted that pretty much all of them seem to use the 2.4 gigahertz range and limit the signal to 16-bit 48 kilohertz. Are there any of the name brand versions, Martin Logan, Klipsch, Outlaw, etc., really any better than the Best Buy Rocketfish brand version that sells for roughly half the price, $60 versus $120 to $150? In all these cases, the SVS plus the whatever solution, the wireless solution, is less than the YQ. Let's just throw that. Put that on the table, all right? So you get more with either or any of these because it's $200 more for the Velodyne, okay? Unless my math is way off, but it's $200 more. Is that right? It's $200.
Yeah, I'm pretty darn sure that's what it was. Yeah.
So if that's the case, then what you're really getting with the YQ is you're getting less performance, but you're hoping that the wireless works right. I don't remember. I remember I did a preview article of these a million years ago, but I don't remember exactly how they work.
They're the same. They're the same thing.
They're 2.4. Aren't they 2.4?
They're still 2.4 gigahertz. They still limit the signal to 16-bit, 48 kilohertz as far as the signal quality. So you're not getting any sort of superior wireless signal with the Velodyne. It just happens to be pre-built in for $200 extra.
Yeah, I guess the key here though is that it also has some sort of automated EQ.
Right. Yeah. So, it comes with a microphone and
all that. So there for me is the selling point. Okay, if you do not need the extra output, if you're not worried about the lower ability of the SVS, the EQ could have me sway towards that side. My thought with Cesar here is that he wants the SVS because he knows it's good. But he wants the Y Cube for a lot of other reasons. Now,
Right.
if you're asking me if I think the YQ is good enough, assuming that your room does not need that extra output, I would probably not fault you for buying it. In my case, I would probably not buy it, but I have a feeling that his just based on this sort of sense I get of his question is that I think he's looking for some sort of validation for why he get the YQ. If that's what you're looking for, get the YQ and live a happy and long life. I don't think that you would be doing anything wrong there.
No.
This is not a bad sub. The YQ is not a bad sub.
No.
By any means. So you're okay on that. Is the SVS a better sub? It is. But is it a hugely better sub? It's definitely $200 better for me, for sure. It's definitely that amount better, and it would be no contest in my book. But I'm not you, and I think that you have other considerations that are going on here. And if that's the case, dude, go on, get it, live a happy life. But if you end up going with the SVS, I would just buy the cheapest wireless solution I could get, and buy it from someplace that has a good return policy. And go home and test it out.
Yeah, I mean, I looked up this, I didn't delve into it deeply, but I looked up on Navia's forum and wherever I could find some reviews. It wasn't a complaint. The only distinction, I guess, that I could find mentioned about that Rocketfish one in particular is that it introduced a little bit more latency. There's a little bit of a delay in the signal because it's being encoded into whatever wireless format they're using to send the signal and then being decoded on the receiving end. And apparently the Rocketfish adds a little bit more delay. It's somewhere in the range of 25 to 30 milliseconds of delay that's being introduced there, whereas apparently the Outlaw or the Audio Engine, which were the top two that seem to be getting recommended by everyone, only added about 10 milliseconds of delay. Now, on a subwoofer, that is really, really not a big deal because you can adjust the phase by adjusting the distance in your AV receiver. If you're using an auto setup program like Odyssey or YPower, MCACC, or any of those, it's going to do that for you anyway. And that's definitely
distance.
Don't change. Yeah, it might give you a weird-looking distance, right? It might say that your subwoofer is 30 feet away. That's fine in a case like this because the signal actually is being delayed by the wireless thing. But that was the only thing I could find where anyone was indicating that the Rocketfish system was in any way inferior to these more expensive ones.
I remember when Rocketfish came out. I think Clint tested it, and he thought it was just fine.
Yep.
I think that I remember my custom installer friend guy. He said he used it.
Yep.
He thought it was no problem. I mean, I think you're probably with that price difference. You're looking at you might get a dead unit or a bum unit, and if that's the case, well, that's why I said go to a place. I mean,
it's Best Buy. That's doesn't become more widely available and easy to return than that. So
yeah. Well, if he goes with a different one, I mean, okay. Anyway, so there you go. Cesar, there it is. So you can cherry pick from what we just said anything you want to do whatever you want to do with it. Okay. There you go. Charles over on Facebook. He's got a Pioneer receiver and clipped speakers with speaker wire that was pre-wired inside the walls. When he's playing loud music during a party, the system will suddenly cut out and go silent. What could be the cause? Oh, Charles. Have you hung any pictures lately, Charles?
Or even not. It doesn't even have to be that.
Yes. Okay, Charles, this is what you're going to do. The first thing you're going to do, and you're going to argue with me, and you're going to do it anyway. So the first thing you're going to do is you're going to rewire every single speaker, and you're going to rewire the back of your receiver. Okay? That means that if you're using banana plugs, you're going to rewire all of them. You're going to take a look at every single one, and you're going to make sure that there is not a single strand of wire that is going off in some direction. If you're using bare wire connections, you're going to be doubly sure. You might rewire it 2 or 3 times just to be sure. You've got a short, Charles. You've got a short. Okay? This is classic symptoms of a short. What happens is as the wire heats up, because you're playing it loud, you're putting more power through it, whatever the wire is, wherever it's shorting, is starting to move ever so slightly. I would guess it's going to be at the back of your receiver. It's typically where I find them, but it could be at the back of your speaker. The little wire is starting to move a little bit as it gets hot, and boom, it touches. And when it touches, it shorts, shuts down your receiver, and it takes you a while to power it back up again. That's almost certainly what it is. Unless he says something along the lines of, and I touched my receiver and I could fry an egg on it, in which case you have a completely different problem, but it's probably similar. Rob?
Yeah, that is the number one case is going to be. It is so easy to have one tiny little strand of speaker wire. I'm not talking about the whole lead. I'm not talking you stripped it off and the entire thing is loose and frayed and going all over the place. One tiny little thread of that stranded speaker wire is all it takes. And, I mean, yeah, it could be the back of your receiver, the back of your speakers, or since these were pre-wired runs that were done in the walls, I'm sure you've got some kind of connection at the wall itself. You know, maybe you have wall plates that were installed, so you run from the receiver to a wall plate, and then from a wall plate on the other end to your speaker. Check inside those wall plates. Yeah. You could very, very easily, from the pre-wire that was done, have one tiny little strand that didn't get properly put into the banana plug or...
Don't just look at it. Don't just look at it, because I've done that. I've just looked at it and gone, it's fine, it's fine, I can see it's fine. Guess what? It's not fine. There's something wrong, and you need to physically disconnect everything, maybe restrip wires if you see that there's any sort of cuts in the what is it, the casing of the wire, if you've seen any cuts or anything weird there. Anything looks even the littlest bit out of place, or even if it doesn't, redo it. Redo it. And
no, I've never met anyone who likes the advice, check your connections, check your speaker wire, because that's akin to, did you turn your router on and off when you have a network problem? It sounds like that kind of troubleshooting advice. I don't think I've ever come across a situation like what Charles has just described that was not a shorted wire.
It's a short.
It's almost always, and we've all done it. We've all done it.
In one home theater, it's happened to me on two different continents. So I'm a professional. It's happened to me. You are not above this, okay? It's okay. You're not a bad person. You're not irresponsible. It's a pain in the ass, I know, but that's what it is. It's also happened to my dad, and he did the same thing. He goes, no, my speaker wires are fine. I'm like, no, they're not. No, they're not. They're not. So it happens. Don't worry. Jonathan wanted to discuss the recent Bamberg Series 3 TMW loudspeaker preview that was posted over at Audioholics. I did not write this.
No.
I just want to just point that out. This is not one of the ones I wrote. In particular, I was very interested in this quote, and begin quote. One interesting technical feature is the crossover has been meticulously engineered to eliminate the floor bounce dip that normally occurs around 250 to 300 hertz. Bamberg notes this leads to a richer tonal balance and without artificially deviating from the neutral voicing. End quote. Now, that's from the preview over Audioholics. How can Bamberg remove the floor bounce with a crossover adjustment? If they're just altering the frequency response, wouldn't the final sound depend on the room, carpet versus hardwood, etc.? And how far away and how far away you are sitting? And how can they eliminate a reflection without altering the neutral voicing? Now, this is very good, Jonathan. Very good observation. I read this exact same thing. I read that exact same quote, and I went, that was exactly my reaction. I got to the end of the line and went, okay, read it again. When we read it again, you'll see that what the previewer, the guy who wrote this, is doing. He's saying, this is what they say they're doing. He is not making any claims that they are actually doing it. Okay, so he's just putting that out there. I do this in preview articles all the time when I think whatever somebody said is complete BS. Now, I'm not saying that's what this guy thinks. I think it's BS, but I don't necessarily think that whoever wrote this article is saying that. But when I think something sounds fishy or marketing speak or outright lies, I'll say so-and-so claims, or this is, they promise this or whatever. And basically what I'm saying is that this is what they're saying. Don't put that on me. And that's what this quote is saying. One interesting technical feature is the crossover it's been engineered, not by them, not by the writer, but by the company. And Bamberg notes, or they claim, that this is what you're going to get because of what they've done.
Mm.
Maybe, but no. Okay, can they remove a floor bounce with a crossover adjustment? Yes, if you actually get to adjust it. But since it's not in the room with you and you're not the one doing the adjusting, how can they possibly know? They can't. So they've just basically what they're saying is that they were really careful with the crossover. So is everybody else. So what? It's marketing. It's marketing.
Yeah, we mentioned the floor bounce. It was either last week or the week before. I forget who it was, but so somebody was saying they were taking some measurements and they noticed that they have this sort of hump up around 200 hertz. I think it was 180 hertz in that person's case, and was sort of wondering, well, why was that there? How do we get rid of it? Yeah, floor bounce is just a form of boundary reinforcement. We talk about this with subwoofers all the time, to be sure, but we talk about it with speakers too. When you put a speaker or a subwoofer physically closer to any wall or boundary, the floor is also a boundary. When you put it physically close to that boundary, you get some reinforcement of those sound waves. The sound waves bounce off of that surface and come back and interact with the sound waves that are coming directly out of the speaker. It is unavoidable unless you are not going to have a floor. You are going to have a floor bounce, and it is going to change depending on whether you've got thick carpet there or a hardwood floor. And the frequency is going to change depending on how far away you're sitting, because you just changed the distance, and that changes the wavelength that gets affected by the floor bounce. So, can Bamberg really be doing this? Well, they can certainly be altering the frequency response, because the crossover is just a filter. It's just a series of filters. That's all it is. So they can change that. But you'll see this a lot in professional studio speakers. They'll very often give you a adjustment knob or a switch that they'll call the mid bass or the boundary adjustment. They'll put it right in there, because in studios you're usually putting it on a desk, or maybe you've got them really close to a wall, or maybe they're sort of in the corners of your studio, and they give you an adjustment knob so you can turn up or turn down that exact sort of range where you very often get a hump or a dip because of the reflections of your room. It doesn't sound like Bamberg's doing that. It sounds like they gave you one setting that they're hoping will work, and well, maybe it'll do the opposite of what they're hoping.
Maybe they'll put maybe they'll have a suck out right there at those frequencies.
Or a big hump.
Which I really, they're not saying anything. They're just putting words up there to say that we've spent some time paying attention to our crossover. I mean, they're just trying to differentiate themselves, and maybe I mean, I don't think it's necessarily a bad thing to say that they've spent some time in their crossover, or they have quality components, or whatever, and I imagine that there's I don't really know, but in my mind I always come up with these scenarios of how stuff gets in press releases.
Mm-hmm.
And I always feel like there's a meeting with a long table with engineers at one side and marketing guys at the other. And the marketing guys say, "Well, can we say this?" And the engineers are like, "I mean, I guess technically it kind of does that." All right, we're putting that down for sure. We definitely do.
Yep.
Can I quote you on this? I guess. No, could you not? Because I'd feel dirty. We're gonna quote you on it anyways, because we want you want a job, right? Yeah, okay. That's the way I feel like these things kind of happen. Maybe not. Maybe there's somebody over there that really believes it, but just don't read too much into it. It's good that Jonathan pointed this out, because this is exactly how I write sometimes too. When I come across something, I'm like, listen, I don't know. I've never listened to the speaker. I've never measured the speaker. I can't definitively say that what they're saying is complete hogwash. But it certainly sounds that way to me. Therefore, I'm not going to say that I said it. I'm going to say that they said it,
right?
And then you can come up with the you can do the same thing Jonathan did, which is to go, well, that sounds like BS.
I mean, you'll see this all the time in the marketing speak that you'll find on the manufacturer's own websites, or as quotes in reviews, or these type of things. Buzzwords, right? Or pseudoscience words that they know people have come across. Like, they know that someone is getting into home theater, or they're getting into hi-fi, and they're starting to read magazines, and they're starting to read forums, and you'll find these buzzwords. And so they're going to say, yep, that floor bounce you've read about but don't totally understand, oh, we fixed that. We
got that one. We're down with that. We're down with the bounce.
Skin effect on cables. You've heard about skin effect, right? Oh, we totally solved that. even though it doesn't apply to audio signals, right? So, I mean, it's that type of thing. They'll find a buzzword or a pseudoscience word that they can throw in there and say, oh, yeah, we totally fixed that. So.
Yeah. Don't worry about that. They're just trying to differentiate themselves. Nick, if you recall, Nick wants to install the wall-to-wall 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio projection screen in a 20-foot-long room with 2 rows of seating. He previously said that he cared a lot more about the video than the audio, but when he heard us suggesting in-wall or on-wall speakers, he found himself instinctively cringing. As well you should, sir. Yes. Good for you for having an audio, that little streak of audiophile in you. Good for you. Because, yes, on-wall and in-wall speakers are awful.
Well, I wouldn't go that far, but they are a compromised design.
They are a compromise, yes. They're not
yes.
awful. So it turns out he cares about audio, so good for him. With that in mind, he'd like our advice on the best way to balance A, keeping the largest screen size possible, B, keeping enough distance within the room for 2 rows of seats, and C, keeping the cost reasonable. I just want to say that ever since Rob suggested in the last little segment there that unless you're not going to have a floor, I now have this image of like speakers on like Minecraft-like stalks. And then like a couch on Minecraft-like stalks, and then just like the whole thing suspended up in the air. It'd be the most stressful home theater you were ever in. But technically, it would be very neutral. You know?
Full 4 pi space. Everything is at least 56 feet away from you. Even 20 hertz space is directional up there.
Awesome.
Would it? I don't know if it's even more uncomfortable than an echoing chamber.
We'll call it the clench theater, right? Because when you get up there, right? People go, "Oh God, what do I do here?" I'm sorry. So Nick, that's what I suggest. I suggest putting everything on 56-foot poles. Sorry. I'm goofy. So he wants a reasonable cost. He wants enough distance for 2 rows of seats and the largest screen size possible. So think of that false wall might be his best solution. That allows him to put regular speakers behind a fixed frame, acoustically transparent screen, all of which keeps the cost down. But it would take away from the length of the room. So what do we think? Yeah, you're. 20 feet is kind of tight for getting 2 rows of seats in anyways, so sucking up, which is essentially going to be, I mean, I think you're looking at a minimum of 3 feet of the room. And that's if you get front-ported speakers.
Absolute bare minimum would be 2 feet.
Yeah.
Then you're basically back to on-wall speakers, whether you want to be or not.
Yeah, whether they are or not, they're basically on the wall. So I think really a realistic minimum is 3 feet. So you're looking at now reducing your room size to 17 feet. That makes 2 rows of seats awfully tight. Awfully tight. So really, I think your problem here is the 2 rows of seats. But if that's really what you want, and I think it's good. On-wall speakers and in-wall speakers aren't the end of the world. It really kind of depends. Now, I don't remember what his budget was before for speakers, but when we're looking at something like RBH, in particular, RBH in-wall and on-wall offerings sound so much like their actual box speakers. That's really hard for me to go, oh no, they're no good. Some of the other ones, you can really hear the compromise. But with RBH, it's much less obvious. So if it were me, and this was what I was really worried about, and I really wanted to have good sound, I really wanted to have the biggest possible room, I would be looking at what I can do to make sure my budget can handle those speakers. Those are the only speakers in wall that I've really actually heard that went, I mean, these are really good speakers. I mean, and of course Clint's got like the whatever the T2 tower ones were, but with upgraded SAS drivers or whatever and everything else, all built into like a cabinet thing that's basically built into his wall. And you would not go in there and go, oh well, you can definitely hear the trebles, whatever. No, that place it's amazing in there. It sounds amazing, and that's all in wall stuff. There's no reason to think that. So if this is really what I think, you really do have to get to get those 2 rows of seats. I think you really do have to really think about on-wall or in-wall speakers, and I think that you're just going to have to spend more money on them, more money than you were planning on spending.
I have one other possible solution for this, which is
if you say in ceiling, I'm going to throw something from the computer at you.
I would not say in ceiling for your front speakers. Come on, you know me better than that.
Yeah, I would hope so.
He is a videophile. He cares a lot about the video. He says still, despite all this, still more than the audio in the grand scheme of things. One of the things he's undoubtedly following is THX's recommendation, which is that when you're sitting down, you're in your comfortable position, ready to watch your movie. Take your eye line, because your eye is naturally going to relax at a certain level. Now, if you're in a recliner, which I'm imagining he probably is. He's probably setting up
sure.
to his recliners. If you're in a recliner, your eye line is naturally angled up a little bit, right? You're reclined back, so your head's tilted back a little bit. Your normal eye line, where your eye wants to rest, is angled up a little bit. Now, THX says the very top of your screen, the very tip top of your screen, should never be more than 15 degrees vertically above your resting eye line. But if you're in a recliner and your eye line is already angled up, that could put the top of your screen fairly high. It's, in their diagram that they show on THX's website, they show a completely horizontal line from the person's eyes to the wall in front of them, and then say, don't go 15 degrees above that. But that is not your resting eye line if you're in a recliner. So one thing you might be able to do, and this is something you're going to want to sort of test out. I mean, it'd be great to have a laser pointer, right? Use a laser pointer and sort of sit back and point your hand forward and see where that ends up falling. But you might be able to have your screen quite high. Having your screen up quite high is not necessarily the end of the world. Since you're using a 2.35 to 1 aspect ratio screen, one that is much wider than it is tall, you might actually be able to get the screen up quite high and have enough room to have your speakers below the screen. Just regular speakers below the screen. They might be a little bit lower than ear height. Maybe they'll only be 28 inches off the ground or something like that, right? But you could have them below the screen, angle them up a little bit. That really would not be the end of the world. And that way your screen could be right against the front wall. You wouldn't have to increase the cost or lose any space that way. You could use regular speakers. You could have them out into the room, and they're just physically below the screen, maybe angled up a little bit.
M&K used to do that, right?
Yeah.
M&K used to do that. That was their thing. They had those angled speakers, and they would put them right on the floor, but the bottom of this thing. It's definitely possible. One of our listeners, Austin, has suggested double-decker couch. Therefore, you can... Hey, I have actually seen that. I have seen somebody build that in like a dorm room. They had a double-decker couch that they built. Like, they literally physically put one couch on top of the other, and on a frame. So there's your other possible option. But yeah, you can put them on the floor. That's not a bad suggestion. I like that suggestion as well.
Yeah.
If you're to go with the traditional speaker, you might have to like angle it up a little bit. That then if you do that, you're gonna for sure put your second row on a riser so that the line of a line of ears goes from the back row through the front row to the wherever the tweeter is.
Mm-hmm.
That's the case at the very least.
And I mean one thing not to overlook is. If you're looking at good speakers with good center speaker designs, I would go for one that has a tweeter positioned above a mid-range driver, and then if it has woofers, those woofers are flanking that tweeter mid-range stack. You could have 3 of those identical speakers across the front of your room. Nothing says you have to have your front left and right speakers be towers or bookshelves. They can be the center speaker, the exact same speaker, and that would totally give you enough space below the screen. If your screen's elevated a little bit, angle them up a little bit. I think that would sound pretty darn good.
Everybody would think your theater will look weird though, but you're gonna have to just live with that.
I think they'll be distracted by your wall-to-wall 2.3.
That could be true.
They're probably going to be looking at that.
All right. And second, Nick says he was looking at the Harman white paper on positioning multiple subwoofers that we talked about on the last podcast, or maybe a couple of weeks ago. He knows that they specifically mentioned having 2 subwoofers in diagonally opposite corners, which is something we've recommended several times in the podcast. But according to the white paper, the results of that placement while better than a lone subwoofer, were seemingly nowhere near as good as having two subwoofers at the midpoints of opposing walls. So Nick is a little concerned about us saying that diagonally opposite corners is still a good placement. Yeah. We didn't say it was the best placement. We said it was better than a lot of other placements. And that's sort of, and that's what the paper says as well. It sort of rank orders them and says, well, if you can't put them in the middle of the wall, then put them, kind of mirror imaged of each other on opposite walls. And if you can't do that, then put them in opposing corners.
Yeah, I mean, the white paper itself doesn't lay it out in language that plain.
No.
This is a good clarification. I mean, I'm glad that Nick brought this up because he's right. And in that white paper, they actually went ahead and did real-world tests. They didn't only simulate this. They took the simulated results and then did real-world tests and real-world measurements with real people in a real room with real subwoofers, and the projected results lined up very closely. Not exactly spot on. There were a few little differences, real-world versus simulated, because of things like I have a door in this real room and I didn't in the simulated room. Things like that, which alter it a little bit. But overall, the projected results lined up very well with the real results. So the thing is, yes, the diagonally opposite corner placement of two subwoofers, it didn't come out as good as using the midpoints in terms of seat to seat, having uniform bass across all of the seats. But it definitely is an improvement over just one, and especially it was an improvement. The one I really want to point out is that it was a improvement over having two subwoofers, but both of them up at the front of the room. Either both in the front corners or both of them essentially where you would put your front left and right speakers, right beside your front towers or acting
like using your subwoofer
stands.
as a bookshelf stand.
Yeah. So compared to those placements, diagonally opposite corners were superior. So that's what I mean is a good clarification. That is not your first choice, right? If you
Honestly, I hate subwoofers in corners no matter what.
Right.
It's really hard for me to ever recommend that, but it is better than other options as long as you're like if you have a single subwoofer and you put it in the corner, you are making a huge mistake. But that's almost always the case, unless you have a really bad subwoofer.
And it's funny because that is so commonly recommended, right? You'll see that in manuals for subwoofers. It says if you can, put it in the corner, and it's like not if you want actual linear response. If all you want is to boom out a couple of particular frequencies where they get totally reinforced at your seat, then okay. But that's
honestly that's what a lot of people think is good bass.
Right.
They think having that sort of really super loud, tactile, a couple of frequencies, they're like they love it. They think it sounds great. Mm-hmm. They don't realize is that they're missing out on so much more of the bass that they could be hearing.
Mm-hmm.
So there you go.
Yeah. The big point is a lot of times people don't have free reign of where realistically they can place their subwoofers, and very often the corner is the only place they can put their sub. Otherwise it's going to block a walkway, or someone just doesn't want to see it, and they just say, "Hey, look, just put it in the corner because I won't really notice it if it's over there." If you're in that situation, diagonally opposite is as good as you can do with corner placement. Yeah.
That's right. And if you only have one and the only place in the corner is the corner, well, then you just have to deal with that, and that's fine.
Yep.
I will only judge you if I look around your room and say you could put it there, or you could put it there, or you could put it there. Why it's in that corner back there, and you don't have a good response. All right, David V and Bill R both want to know if they should hop on Aperion Audio's current sale. Answer yes. Can we go on, or do we have to? I guess we have to actually answer their question.
A little bit of clarification might help you.
All right, so Aperion Audio. We're fans. David has a small, oddly shaped room where I suggested that he use a pull-up screen. He really liked that idea, as well as Rob's suggestion for the Aperion Ferris Forte bookshelf speakers. But with these sales prices, David is wondering if he should get the Veris Grand bookshelf speakers instead. Are they considerably better than the Veris Forte? I think objectively they are. Like from a measurement standpoint, they are better than the Forte. It's very hard for me because my life, in my personal experience, I found that I most often regret when I don't jump on the chance to get something I really want. And I'll often find that I will purchase something again that I could have just purchased once if I had just spent a little bit more money to begin with. So I tend to try to err on the side of getting what I want or getting nothing at all. So in this case, the Forte was what we suggested because of price point and where he was at and these other things. But if these are bookshelves that you're going to want to live with for a really, really long time, and you're thinking, if I get these Veris Grands, this is going to be the speaker. I'm going to be happy with these forever. I'm not going to have to worry about upgrading. Well, then I would definitely push you in that direction. I would say that you're not going to be wasting your money. Now, if you're thinking, I'm buying speakers that have a narrower dispersion because I'm in an apartment and I don't know where I'm going to end up, and I might want to upgrade in the future, well, then save your money and get the Forte and go that way. But if it were me, I'd be buying the Veris Grand. Rob.
Yeah, I mean, David's was a particular case because when he was asking his question about what he should do, his top priority was getting a really large screen size into an oddly shaped room where if he put a big flat panel and he used a wall mount because it had to kind of go into a corner but not at a full 45-degree angle, and there was going to be some weirdness to it. And if he was going to do that, he wasn't really going to have anywhere to put regular speakers. He wasn't going to be able to put towers beside that big flat panel or put regular bookshelves on stands. And so my Veris Forte recommendation at that time had as much to do with price, because that was part of it too, but it also had to do with the idea of, I was saying, well, they have brackets that you can put onto TV wall mounts. You can actually put a bracket that will hang down below the TV, and then you can mount speakers onto the bracket. And the Veris Forte already have a wall mount. They're already small and light, so you don't have to worry about their weight or their size being a problem. And they're this concentric design where the tweeter is embedded in the middle of the woofer, and they're front ported. So they had all of the design choices that would make them easy to put into this cramped space where nothing else was really going to work. But now he's thinking about doing this pull-up screen, which was a great suggestion. I mean, that's the way to get the biggest screen size. If you're using a pull-up screen, well, you're not going to be mounting your speakers to any sort of bracket. Yeah. That's out the window. So he's going to be using traditional speakers of some sort. The Veris Grand, objectively, they play lower, they're more efficient, they can play louder. They are, in all of those ways, the superior speaker. That you're getting something for that money. So, yep, I've got the same suggestion. That I agree with Tom.
He came at it from a different angle, but we got to the same place. That's the way Canada and America works, baby. Working together. Same thing.
I don't know. We always end up in the same place as countries, but okay.
No, but in this case, it was. Yeah. All right. Okay, now Bill, who is also thinking about this Aperion audio sale, is looking to set up a dedicated 2.1 listening room in a small 10 by 12 foot space. He's willing to spend as much as $2,000 on the speakers. I guess that probably includes the subwoofer. But the Veris Grand are such a good deal during the sale that he's wondering if he should jump on them. Bill is very undecided and even considering a dedicated headphone setup with the same budget. Dang, Bill, that's a hard one. That's a much harder one. I'm going to let Rob answer this one first.
Okay, well, yeah, this is tough because you're talking about a considerably higher potential budget if all of that $2,000 can be spent on just one pair of speakers. Matt, I mean, the Veris Grand are really good speakers. Are they the be-all, end-all of speakers? Is it possible to do any better in any metric? Well, kinda, yeah. I mean, there are ribbon tweeter speakers that have faster transient response. I don't think you need loudness. Loudness isn't going to be a problem in a room that size. No. But I mean, you could maybe get a little bit faster transient response. Something like that. It exists. It can be done within that budget. This is really, really hard to say. Either go for it or don't, because this isn't one that's saying, oh, hey, I was waiting for them to come down to this price. Should I jump on them now? Because you've got a larger budget. You could spend more and get a little bit more. I mean, much like before, where we had a $4,000 to $5,000 budget, it's almost you can get paralysis because there's so much choice and good choice. It's rare that you're going to spend $2,000 on a pair of bookshelf speakers and come away really disappointed with almost anything you buy from any reputable brand. I don't know. Ask Aperion, make sure that during the sale, the whole return shipping thing paid both ways is still in effect. if it is, bring them in and listen to them. I mean,
Yeah.
that's the best thing you can do.
I would be looking at the Dolly, like their Mentor series or Icon
Is
series. I
that,
can't remember
yeah?
which one it was, but they just blew me away. They were so good. I remember that they may be a little bit more expensive than this. They may be
Yeah.
closer to 5 grand.
I mean, the Ascend Sierra 2s
Yeah.
with their ribbon tweeter, and that's a genuine ribbon. It's not a folded ribbon or an off-the-shelf ribbon or anything like that. It's a true ribbon tweeter, completely built only for Ascend by RAL out of Serbia. So I mean, it's like they're $1,500 a pair, and they're fantastic, but
Yeah.
they're not necessarily going to be your favorite speaker. It's really hard to say.
Yeah, it's really hard to say, Bill. I guess you know what? I'm going to kind of go out on a limb here. These are the things I would be thinking of if I were you. The first thing I would think about is, am I going to be the only one listening to this music?
Mm.
If that's the case, then that's a big check mark in the headphone, because for $2,000, you can get yourself a buttload of headphone. I mean, you can get pretty much near top-end performance. I mean, yeah, you could probably eke out, you can get 98% of the performance that you can get out of a headphone for around $2,000. That's what I think. I mean, it's pretty close. That's even, I mean, I don't know.
I mean, the thing is, headphones, as I love headphones. I love headphones. I go after them all the time, but they can't give you the tactile bass
Let me
that
finish.
rumbles your whole body.
I didn't interrupt you. So I would be thinking about if I'm the only one going to be listening to this music. Number two, do I want to be able to feel the bass? Is that bass, is that envelopingness of the bass and the sound important to me? Is that important to my listening experience? If it's not, if headphones feel just fine to you, and that feels just as that low bass that you can get, and you can get some really low for $2,000, you can get a lot of very low bass. It will not be tactile, but it's also not, to me, it's not the same experience as hearing a speaker in a room. Doesn't have the same experience. Is that, those are kind of the two questions I would be asking myself.
Yeah.
And then to know which way to go with this. Because if you answer those questions in one way, headphones are the way to go, because I think performance-wise, you can get just so much performance out of a $2,000 set of headphones that it's certainly going to be something that's going to be you're going to be very, very happy with. But if either of those two answers are, no, I'm going to be listening to this with some other people on occasion, or yes, I really like to have the sound feel like it's in the room all around me, and I want to be able to feel this bass, you need an actual speaker. And in which case, like Rob said, at this price point, oodles of choices, and you need to listen, listen, listen. And frankly, the Veris Grand are great speakers, and I have no problem recommending them. But at $2,000, you've got so many options out there that it's hard to say, hey, I know they're on sale, but
Yeah, I mean, I think maybe Bill's in the situation where he was maybe kind of hoping we would say, hey, the Veris Grand are as good as a bookshelf speaker can get. There's never a reason to ever pay more.
I'm never saying that, dude.
Yeah, I mean, that's next to impossible to say. To put it in objective terms, because that's the most reliable thing we can do. Objectively, you can get speakers at a higher price point that have faster transient response. You can get speakers that are even slightly more linear in their response. You can definitely get speakers that have different dispersion. I mean, dispersion is neither necessarily good or bad either way. You can definitely get ones that have different dispersion than the Aperion Veris Grand. So objectively, there can definitely be differences. The biggest one to me is transient response, because if you're looking at $2,000 headphones, you're probably looking at some sort of planar headphone there too. And the reason we start getting into planar drivers when we go into these price points, it's pretty much all because of the transient response that they can produce, the stops and starts of notes, because planar drivers are so physically light, they have hardly any mass, they can stop on a dime, unlike any metal or silk or paper driver could. That is just, it's got more mass, therefore it's got more inertia. There's no getting around that. So there's somewhere else to go beyond the Aperion Veris Grand, just objectively. So yeah. I can't allay all of your worries on that front.
Sorry, dude. I wanted to look up to see if Status Acoustics is still selling bookshelf speakers.
Oh, the Decimos?
Decimos, but it doesn't look like they sell the Decimos anymore. I remember those being more expensive too, somewhere around $5,000. But,
yeah, I mean, in this price range, you've got, Paradigm's signature series with their beryllium tweeters. You got Focal's beryllium tweeter offerings too. So I mean, those are going to be more than $2,000 a pair. But again, why beryllium and why is it so expensive? Because it is the lightest metal that we can possibly use at this time with our engineering technology. For a tweeter. So it's about getting that transient response as fast as possible. The lightest mass, the least inertia. So that ends up being what you pay for.
Yeah. All right, Jason E. wants to know what we recommend for some $200 to $250 speakers for surround duty to match his Axiom M50 towers. They sell M50 towers still?
Yeah, well, his are the older ones. I think his are either the TI or the V2. Because he was mentioning, their prices have gone up. No, the M50s are back. The M40s went away. They used to have the little M40s, which were basically a bookshelf speaker in a tower cabinet. But the M50s have been around and remain around.
Oh, I thought they left. And, okay, he's got Axiom M50 towers and a Paradigm center up front. He's currently using some Klipsch hand-me-downs that he says just sound blah, and they don't match very well. Color me not shocked about that. He had a pair of Paradigm Titans that he really liked before, but one broke. I assume I'm reading between the lines, and he doesn't want to buy another one because they're too expensive now?
Well, because the Titan no longer exists.
You can't find one on eBay or something? I don't know. That would be what I'd do. So he's looking for a reasonably priced alternative since Axiom prices have increased so much over the past few years. Do we have any suggestions? Anything with not a horn-loaded tweeter to start with. The reason you're having problems with their Klipsch is because it has a horn-loaded tweeter. They have completely different sonic signatures. Not only that, as far as how easy they are to drive, the Klipsch ones are going to be so much more easy to drive that it's going to be very hard to level match them very accurately between the Axioms and the Klipsch. And then tonally, I mean, talk about a mismatch. Really, the timbre of those things are so different. I just can't imagine. A blah, I only really believe the blah. I just believe that they sound completely different, and therefore one sounds different than in this case the Klipsch come off sounding blah. I bet if they were matched with other Klipsch speakers, you would think they'd sound fine. So what do I think you should do? I don't have specific suggestions, but I would go with it. I would start with anything with an aluminum tweeter, specifically something. I mean, I'm sure you have brands. Why am I even trying to rack my brain for one? Go on.
Energy speakers. Axiom, Paradigm, Energy, Athena, back when they existed.
Anything from Canada.
Canadian speaker brands. All these Canadian speaker brands took the same research that came out of the NRC research that Floyd Toole did. They took that research, they took the frequency response graphs, the dispersion, the family of curves, all of the things that they measured in the anechoic chamber, and going through all the subjective tests that they did, and they all came to pretty similar sound signatures across. It's why you can identify this Canadian sound, much like there is sort of a known British sound to a lot of speakers that come out of the UK. There is a Canadian sound, which is a pretty darn linear sound when you come right down to it, because that's what they figured out worked best at the NRC research. So in my experience, Energy speakers, Axiom speakers, Paradigm speakers, overall, do they sound exactly the same? No, of course not. But they sound far more similar than different.
They sound
and if
pretty
you're looking for something,
close, dude. That's what.
If you're looking for something you can still buy that is in this price range, Energy has you there. I sent Jason a link to some of the, I think it was the CBNs, fit right in this price range. Boom. That's where I
should have given you a hint right there, Jason, when you were able to match a Paradigm Center with the Axiom Towers. And
he says that matches really good, and he was really happy with it. And the Paradigm Titans, which were a bookshelf speaker from Paradigm, they matched well.
Not at all shocked. Not at all shocked. Okay. He also wanted to bemoan his personal pet peeve, which is that flat panel TVs still have overscan. Why is this the case? Because nothing ever goes away in TVs. They just add to it, and we all have to deal with it. And yes, almost all flat panels do have a 1-to-1 pixel mode under one name or another, but it's never the default, and broadcasts still seem to be formatted for overscan. In fact, if you do have a 1-to-1 there, you can find the 1-to-1 pixel pixel mode, which maps exactly up there. My personal pet peeve on this is when you can see the audio track. Anyway, it'll look like flashing lights, usually over on the right side. At least that's what I've seen.
Sometimes along the top, there's some noise up there too. Yeah.
It'll look like some sort of flashing like noise on a light rail, and that's the audio track that you're seeing. It drives me bonkers when I see that. I'm like, Then you do overscan, you just see how many pixels you lose. You're like, I'm losing pixels. Those are pixels I should see. There might be some important detail there. What if that's how the crime is solved? Why do we still have overscan, Rob? Sucks.
I mean, same reason we still technically have a black and white signal embedded into all of the broadcasts too. I mean,
stuff doesn't go away. They just
it's still exists. I mean, Home Theater Geeks, their last episode, they had Joel Silver from the Imaging Science Foundation on. He's the president there of ISF, and they were talking all about gamma and why we're still using this gamma curve that goes back to the old tube CRTs. When there's no technical reason why we still need to, there's absolutely no reason to do it, but we do, because someone out there might still have a CRT.
So, there's people definitely who have CRTs, but I don't think that we should cater to them anymore. That's what I say. If you're still rocking a CRT, you're on your own.
I agree with you, Jason. It is a pet peeve. Anybody who cares about it is going to find that 1-to-1 pixel mode somehow. My biggest pet peeve is, why don't you just call it 1-to-1 pixel mode or something? Like, why does it have to be just scan or screen fit or some other stupid name that you have to decode? It's like, just give it a clear name. That's all I want. Because anyone who cares about it will find it. Most people don't care. They're never going to notice that 3% of their pixels...
It's still in dynamic. Those people still have it in dynamic. They're not worried about 1-to-1 pixel, what you called it. So, all right, Roland's father-in-law has a 5,000 square foot showroom, and he'd like to install 6 speakers so that he can have music playing. Just light background music, that sort of stuff. That's a JPEG. Am I supposed to open that JPEG?
It's a motorcycle shop, just to show you what the showroom is.
Yeah. Is it the Triumph place?
Could be. I'm not sure the exact place.
It's the Triumph place. Oh, I want to go. Okay, I have a Triumph motorcycle, for those of you that care. You don't, but I do. He'd like wireless speakers if possible. Roland found the cables to go wireless speakers on Amazon and wondered what we thought about them. Are those the really, I think I looked at this link already. We will send you these links. Yes. Oh, there it is. It's 4 speakers and a transmitter and the weirdest looking remote I've ever seen for $130. I think the plastic that these things are encased in costs more than $130. That gives me pause.
Yes. Yeah, I don't like the whole price is always an indicator of quality mentality. That is certainly not always the case, but there are certain things that cannot be overcome at certain price points. When you're talking about 4 speakers, let's just begin with 4 speakers for $130, a lot of corners had to be cut. Then these are wireless speakers, so they all have to have some sort of wireless chip built into them. Those aren't terribly expensive, but it's some money. But these are all wireless speakers, so they also have amps built into them. Some kind of little, I guarantee you, it's some cheapo Class D amp.
Yeah.
All of that is getting built into there for $130. It just, I'm sorry, too good to be true if anyone's claiming that these sound great. A whole bunch of the Amazon reviews said these basically sound like really crappy PC speakers, like the really cheapo ones that you might just put on a desk beside your PC. I tend to kind of believe those reviews.
I like they describe the woofer as 3-inch rubber edge. What the hell's a rubber edge? Is that supposed to be a surround? Is that the surround?
Something has to connect whatever the woofer is to the case. So.
And the tweeter is a 2-inch mylar cone. That's an interesting choice.
Okay. Yeah, I would not be expecting anything from those. Hey, I haven't heard them. Maybe they're magic. I kind of seriously doubt that to be the case.
Yeah. I like it's like, okay, here's the most helpful reviews. They're all 1 star. Yeah. Now there's one 5-star. because someone's gonna be different. This is just the titles: poor sound quality plus no stereo support. That's the first one. Craptacular is the second one. Easy to set up but not worth the effort is the third one. Wireless speakers with more static than music is the next one. Speakers failed after warranty period, not replaceable. Okay, that just happens. Poor sound quality, do not buy. I like this one. Junk. Okay, those are just the titles. I don't know, Roland. I don't know. I'm thinking that's $130 you just threw away if you're gonna get it, but maybe they'll be fine.
Yeah.
There's so many really good wireless solutions out there. I mean, there's AirPlay speakers. There's the Forus speakers, which are P-H-O-R-U-S. They're a lot more than this, which are both AirPlay and work with Android, and you can control them and stream from them and that sort of stuff. With those, all these going to be more expensive than $130. That's just the way it goes.
Off the top of my head, when Roland first mentioned this, I was like, wireless? Oh, Sonos. I mean, that's just what pops into my head.
Yeah, Sonos are expensive too. So
definitely more expensive. Yeah.
Yeah, there's tons of expensive. Like, you want really easy to set up. Like Klipsch and a couple other companies make light bulbs, essentially, or light. I don't know if they're light bulbs or they're the. That's not the bulb. It's the housing for the light bulb.
It can screw into a regular light bulb outlet, and that ends up powering the speaker. Yeah.
That's right, and it's wireless, and it has everything else, and it's all in there, and you could put them all over the place. Those aren't going to be cheap either. But there are so many decent wireless solutions out there. Sonos, obviously, this new Denon one that's coming out. Like I said, those aren't going to be cheap. But I think those go. I don't remember what the price. Oh, you know what? I might be open. It's not open. Anyways, the Hios ones might be an option, but those are more like standalone big speaker things.
Right.
What you really want is wireless speakers where you can place them all over the place and just connect them into a wall, and then connect them all via your network, or is really what you want. And I think you're going to be a lot better off that way if you do it that way, rather than trying to do some sort of this. I mean, this is probably operating at 2.4 gigahertz. You're going to have to deal with that, deal with the problems with line of sight, or obviously with a big showroom like that, should be fine, especially if you put them up in the rafters. But distance is going to be an issue. Interference is going to be an issue. You're going to want something a little
just sheer loudness of output in a setting like this does matter. I mean, I know that this is just background. You're not worried about turning this into a club or something like that. Yeah. But at the same time, you just got to deal with the physics of having 5,000 square feet and then a really high ceiling, because this is like a warehouse ceiling, just to get the air to vibrate enough that you're going to hear it at a nice, reasonable level. You do have to take that into consideration. So, I'd worry about that a little bit.
Oh, these can be battery powered too. That's exciting. Oh, and they have mounting holes.
Yeah, I think you're going to need to spend a little bit more than $130 to get this done.
Yeah. They're water resistant. That's exciting.
Oh, yeah.
They're powered by a 900 megahertz phase loop lock circuitry with whatever phase lock is. 900 megahertz. Okay, so they're not operating at 2.4 gigs, so there's something there. And there you go. I don't know, dude. There's a lot of options out there, and this one sounds pretty sketchy. But if you try it and it works out, let us know, and then we'll still think it's sketchy. Zach, last question. Oh my God, we got to the bottom. Wants to put a pair of speakers in his garage, since his garage has large swings in temperature and humidity, and Zach also wants to be able to use these speakers during outdoor parties. Does that mean he wants to move them?
I think he just wants to have them in the garage and then probably open his garage and still be able to hear them while people are outside. I think that's what
Should he limit his search specifically to outdoor speakers? He'd like to keep the price under a few $100s for the pair. Like a lot of things, Zach. I'm not sure that's possible. I bought my parents some outdoor speakers that were, I think, Yamaha, and I got them for a couple $100 a pair. No, I think it was about $120 for the pair, and we mounted them on the eave, and it filled up my parents' backyard no problem. And they were just like bookshelf size speakers,
Hmm.
fully water resistant, waterproof, and all that stuff. The only other option I have, if you're wanting to expand your search past outdoor speakers, is marine.
Right.
You can look into marine speakers, stuff that they put on boats. Those are going to be those might be more expensive just because of how resistant they are, because they got to deal with salt water, which
Yeah.
is even worse than just
Yeah,
swing.
I mean, I don't think that's a necessity in a case like this, right?
No,
Because
it certainly is. I mean, I don't know what he's doing in your
garage, so
garage. I mean,
yeah.
who knows what he's doing in there? But I doubt salt water is probably involved. So, yeah, I think limiting it to outdoor speakers should be fine. And anything that, I mean, you're kind of looking for size here. I mean, unless you've got some reason that you want something small. If you want something that's going to be loud enough to be able to fill like your front yard with just your garage open, then you're really looking for something that's got some size to it. So that's what I would be looking for, is something that's not going to be this little tiny cube-looking speaker. You want something that's got some heft to it. It's going to have a couple of woofers in it.
Yeah, so I mean, I'm by no means an outdoor speaker aficionado. So one of the places I love to check for stuff like this is the Wirecutter, because I actually think that site does a really good job of taking, the well-known candidates, what they can find, listening to them, distilling it down, giving you one choice, but they're giving you alternatives. And they chose Yamaha over there for outdoor speakers. And actually, someone in the comments of that Wirecutter article, I'll link all these up in the show notes over at Facebook and over at avrant.com in the comments there. But somebody linked up a site where pretty much all they do is review outdoor speakers, and they have Yamaha really high up in the list as well. So that seems like definitely a good choice. One of the things that they really like is that Yamaha's outdoor speakers are completely sealed designs,
Yep.
so you're not worried about having ports where insects can get inside or debris of any sort can get inside. They're a sealed
Explain to
speaker.
me when Axiom put out their outdoor speakers they reported, I about lost my mind. I was like, "Are you guys serious?" I'm like, "What are the insides somehow protected from the elements?" I was just like, "You guys are insane." Yes, that's why I bought the Yamaha ones, because they were
Yeah.
completely sealed. That's exactly why I bought them.
Yeah. So
Klipsch makes some too. So
Klipsch has some too, and Klipsch, by and large, Klipsch is very often high efficiency speakers. Very little power makes them play very loud. So that's certainly going to be another one to consider. But I like that suggestion. I do think in a case like this, getting an outdoor speaker is probably the way to go, because, like I say, you got big swings in temperature, and humidity is the big one. Big swings in humidity. It's better safe than sorry, let's say, right? Obviously, a traditional speaker is still going to function, but if you're talking it's made out of wood and you've got lots of humidity and high temperatures, eventually things can kind of go wrong, just material-wise. So I think it's smart to stick to outdoor speakers, and I'd probably be looking at Yamaha and Klipsch.
yeah, I'm looking at what Yamaha's offering here. Klipsch is pretty expensive, so it might
Sure.
not fit into your budget. I am looking at the Yamahas here. They look pretty small mostly, but they're cheap. So, just shop carefully. I think just shop carefully
Yep.
and see what you can get your hands on. So that's that. Cool. That's everybody, dude. My God, are we under 2 hours? Oh, it's
We're
an
under
hour
2 hours.
51.
I like how getting under 2 hours is now a victory for us. Like, you remember when 45 minutes was the target?
Yes, I do. I do remember that. Thank you.
Uh,
All right. Once again,
goodness.
let's say thank you to our 2 listeners of the week. We've got our 3 listeners. Sorry, 3 listeners of the week. We've got Niclas, Wilson, and Jack. Thank you 3 for help supporting the podcast. If you have forgotten by the end of this podcast, you can reach Rob at avrant.com, Tom at avrant, www.avrant.com for the podcast, and facebook.com/avrantpodcast. Rob is at First Reflect, and I am at avrant_Tom. We do. What you want? You have a recommendation? I know.
I
We
did
do
have
record these. We do record these every Tuesday night, which I am thinking of changing to maybe Monday night, or I mean a different night or something, because Tuesdays are killing me for reasons that are of my own. But it's also why I'm so exhausted every Tuesday. But we can talk more about that in the future. And afterwards, we usually have a Google Hangout for those of you that are interested and getting your questions directly answered. So there's that.
Yeah.
Rob, what's your recommendation?
Yeah, we haven't been very consistent on our recommendations, but I wanted to draw people's attention to the Home On podcast over at thedigitalmediazone.com. It's kind of nice. I've been talking a little bit on Twitter with some of the guys who host the podcasts over there, so it's nice getting to know them a little bit. But the Home On podcast is all about home automation, and they just had a really great interview on their last episode with the CEO and CTO of Insteon. Insteon's been in the news lately because they have just announced that they're partnering up with Microsoft with dedicated apps for Windows 8 and Windows Phone 8, as well as the Microsoft stores will now be selling Insteon products. But aside from that news, this interview was great. I learned a whole bunch about how Insteon works, their goals, where they came from, and I was really, really excited because they talked quite a bit about their upcoming partnership with the Staples Connect system, which is Staples' home automation system that I like a lot because for anyone who is not all into programming scripts, who is not all into home automation already, the Staples Connect system, I think, is a great sort of intro system that your average do-it-yourselfer could get into. And Staples has said, yep, we're partnering up with Insteon. Insteon now has reciprocated and said, yep, we're partnering up with Staples Connect. It's not available right this second, but it is definitely happening. So that is really exciting to me because there's a few little things that the Insteon ecosystem of home automation doesn't do. The Staples Connect system fills in some of those small little gaps. So once you have those two things working together, man, that's a pretty comprehensive home automation system. So highly recommend listening to that podcast if you're interested in that sort of thing. I will put the links on Facebook and in the show notes.
There you go. Okay. All right. For AV Rant, I'm talking. Very tired. I'm now shopping for Yamaha speakers. I found some I liked.
Cool.
Which are, I'll have to send you the link. I think there's only 3 left in stock. Ooh. Buy them fast. I won't tell people on the podcast. Anyways, I will. I don't really care. For AV Rant, I'm Tom Mandry.
And I'm Rob H. Now go out and listen to something.
And we will start the Google Hangout momentarily. See you guys.